Windows 11 has some pretty bad features that are truly privacy invading.
Microsoft just made a decision that could slowly destroy Windows, not because Apple did something amazing, not because Linux suddenly became cool, but because Microsoft changed one rule, and millions of people decided they were done. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what Microsoft did, why 400 million people refused to upgrade, and why this might be the beginning of Windows losing control. If you've been wondering why Windows feels different lately, you're in the right place. Everything started with something very small, a tiny chip. Most people had never heard of it. It's called TPM. Now, Microsoft said this chip was about security, and on the surface, that sounds good. Security is good, right? But here's the problem. About half of all Windows 10 computers don't have the right version of that chip. Not because they're broken, not because they're slow, just because they're too old. And by old, I mean 5 or 6 years. Perfectly working computers. Suddenly not allowed to upgrade. Now pause for a second. Imagine your car works perfectly. Then the manufacturer says, "Sorry, this car can't drive on our new roads anymore." That's what happened. And this is where people started asking a dangerous question. Was this really about security or something else? Hold that thought, because what happened next made things worse. Remember that tiny chip? It wasn't the real problem. It was just the door. Pop-ups. Every single day. Upgrade now. Windows 10 support is ending. Protect your PC. At first, it felt normal. A company reminding you that a new version is available, no big deal. But then it didn't stop. Every time you turned on your computer, every time you opened settings, every time you ignored it. And here's the thing, most people weren't excited to upgrade because Windows 10 worked. It wasn't broken, it wasn't slow, it wasn't crashing. It just worked. And when something works, people don't feel urgency, but Microsoft needed urgency, so people clicked upgrade, and then they saw it. This PC doesn't meet the minimum requirements. Now pause there. That sentence sounds technical, but it's not just technical. It's psychological. It doesn't say your computer is old. It says you're not allowed. And millions of people saw that message at the same time. Not a small group, almost half of Windows 10 users. Now here's what made this strange. Many of those computers had powerful processors, 16 or 32 gigabytes of RAM, modern graphics cards, fast SSD drives. In real-world terms, they were more than capable of running Windows 11, but Microsoft said no because of one requirement, TPM 2.0. We're back to the chip. Remember that small security chip we talked about earlier? That tiny piece of hardware became the gatekeeper. No chip, no Windows 11. But here's where it gets interesting. Technically, Windows 11 could run on those machines. It didn't crash, it didn't fail, it worked. So the natural question becomes, if it works, why block it? And this is where everything changed. People online found ways around the restriction. Simple methods, changing a registry value, modifying the installer, using a different installation file, and Windows 11 installed just fine. So Microsoft responded. They started closing those loopholes. Update after update, the workaround stopped working, then new ones appeared. Microsoft patched again. It became a cat and mouse game, and this is the moment when the story stopped being technical and started being emotional. Because when a company says something isn't possible, you prove that it is, and then they actively block you, the conversation shifts. It becomes, why don't they want me to use my own computer? That's a powerful shift. Now let's zoom out for a second. If you block millions of machines at once, what happens? People need new computers. And who benefits when people need new computers? Manufacturers. Intel, AMD, Dell, HP. Now we're not making accusations, but we are noticing timing. The PC market had slowed down. Computers last longer now. People don't replace them every 3 years anymore. Then suddenly, an operating system update makes millions of perfectly good machines incompatible. That restarts the buying cycle. Is it a coincidence? It may be. But here's what matters more. The message users received wasn't, "We're improving your security." The message felt like, "Your computer is obsolete." Even if it wasn't, and that feeling is dangerous, because when a company makes you feel like something you paid for is no longer yours, trust starts to crack. And here's the key point. If Microsoft had simply allowed Windows 11 to install on older hardware, even with a warning, this backlash might never have happened. But they didn't just set a requirement, they enforced it aggressively. And when you close enough doors, people stop knocking, they start looking for a different house, and that leads us to the next shift. Because after blocking hardware, Microsoft decided to block something even more personal, your access to your own computer. And that's where the story goes from frustrating to unsettling. After the hardware lockout, things got personal. Windows 11 removed something simple, the option to create a local account. Before, you had a choice: connect to Microsoft or skip it. Now, you must sign in. You must connect to the internet. You must use a Microsoft account. Think about that. You bought the computer, but you can't even enter it until Microsoft approves your login. That changes the dynamic, because once you log in, everything connects. Your files sync, your settings sync, your browser connects, your data links to one identity. Microsoft says this is for convenience, cloud backup, security, integration, and yeah, that sounds helpful, but here's what made people uncomfortable. The choice disappeared. This wasn't optional. It was enforced, and we've seen this pattern before. Remember the hardware lockout? People found ways around it. Microsoft patched them. Same thing here. Users found small tricks to create local accounts. Microsoft removed them. That repetition matters, because when a company doesn't just recommend something, but blocks every alternative, it feels intentional. Now zoom out. Why insist on accounts? Because accounts power ecosystems. Once you're logged in, OneDrive activates, Microsoft 365 gets promoted, Edge becomes default, Copilot appears. Everything ties back to one central identity, you, and when everything connects to one identity, data connects, and when data connects, the operating system becomes more than software. It becomes a platform, and platforms don't just sell products once. They generate recurring revenue, subscriptions, storage, AI features. Now here's the psychological shift. Windows used to feel like a product you owned. Now it feels like access you're granted. That subtle difference changes trust because access can be controlled. And when you combine hardware restrictions, forced accounts, it starts to feel like your computer isn't fully yours anymore. And we haven't even reached the most controversial part, because once everything is connected, Microsoft introduced something that made people step back. AI that watches. And that's where things escalated. After the hardware lockout, after the forced account, Microsoft introduced something that changed the conversation completely. AI inside the operating system, not as an app, not as a tool you download, built in everywhere. They called part of it recall, and on the surface, it sounded helpful. Recall takes screenshots of what you do on your computer. It stores them locally, then it lets you search your past. You can type, "Find the website I was reading last Tuesday." And it shows you. Convenient, efficient, smart, but now pause. That means your computer is constantly recording what's on your screen. Your messages, your emails, your banking tabs, your private documents. Microsoft said the data stays on your device. Microsoft said it's encrypted. Microsoft said it's optional. But here's what happened next. Security researchers tested it, and they found weaknesses. Early versions stored data in ways that could be accessed if malware got in, which means if your system is compromised, everything is exposed, not just a few files. everything you've seen. And this is where the emotional shift happened, because this wasn't about performance. This wasn't about buying new hardware. This was about trust. Even if Microsoft fixed the technical flaws later, the idea was already planted. Your operating system is watching. Now let's connect the dots. First, they require a chip. Then, they require an account. Then, they integrate AI that analyzes your activity. Individually, each step can be justified. Together, it feels different. And here's the deeper concern. Microsoft invested billions into AI. Billions. That investment has to show returns. So AI isn't just a feature, it's a strategy. Copilot appears in Word, in Excel, in Outlook, in Paint. It's everywhere, even in places where users didn't ask for it. And here's something that raised eyebrows. Microsoft itself warned users not to rely on AI in Excel for critical accuracy because it can hallucinate. Think about that. They integrated AI into productivity tools, but caution users not to fully trust it. So why push it so hard? Because AI increases engagement. It increases subscriptions. It increases ecosystem dependence. And once again, we return to the same question. Is Windows becoming a better operating system or a smarter ecosystem engine? Now imagine you're a lawyer or a business owner or someone handling sensitive information. Even if recall is optional, can you be 100% certain it's disabled? Can you be 100% certain nothing is being indexed? That uncertainty alone is enough for some people to leave. And that's exactly what started happening. Quietly, not loudly, but steadily. Because when an operating system crosses from tool into observer, the relationship changes. And once trust shifts, it's very hard to reverse. And now we've reached a critical point in this story, because when you combine hardware control, account control, AI integration, you don't just have an update, you have a transformation. And transformations create winners and refugees. So the real question becomes, who stays and who leaves? And that's where we look at what's happening in the market right now. Now here's the uncomfortable part. If Windows 11 were clearly faster, most people would forgive everything. But that's not what many users felt. It didn't feel broken, it felt heavier. A little slower to boot, a little slower to open apps, more things running in the background. Not dramatic, just noticeable. And subtle frustration is powerful because you can't point to one big failure. You just think, why does this feel worse than before? Now think about what's running behind the scenes. Cloud syncing, telemetry, widgets, Copilot processes, background services. Your computer isn't just working for you anymore. It's connected, constantly. And modern machines are powerful, so they handle it, but you feel it. Gamers notice small frame drops. Professionals notice battery draining faster. Nothing catastrophic, but enough. And here's the pattern again. Hardware restrictions, forced accounts, AI integration. Now, performance trade-offs. Each one alone is manageable. Together, they create friction. And friction doesn't cause outrage. It causes erosion. People don't rage quit. They quietly start exploring alternatives. Linux looks interesting. Mac feels premium. Chromebooks feel simple, not perfect, just different. And when users start asking, is this still worth it? That's when platforms slowly lose ground, not from a scandal, but from accumulation. And while all this friction was building, something else was happening quietly. Market share was shifting, and that's where this story really lands. Here's what makes this different. Windows isn't collapsing. There's no headline saying, Windows is dead. It's quieter than that. People are leaving. Slowly. I'll try Linux. Maybe my next laptop is a Mac. A Chromebook might be enough. Small decisions. But millions of small decisions add up. Look at the pattern. Hardware restrictions. Forced accounts. AI integration, performance friction, each one survivable. Together, they change the relationship, and migration isn't about features, it's about feeling. For decades, Windows felt neutral. Now it feels directed, managed, connected, and when users feel managed, some look for independence. Linux growth isn't explosive, it's steady. Mac adoption isn't dramatic, it's consistent. This isn't rebellion, it's erosion. And erosion is dangerous because companies underestimate it. Windows is still dominant, but dominance isn't permanent. If this trend continues for 3 years, momentum shifts. Windows may not disappear, but it may stop being the default, and for the first time in decades, that feels possible. So let me ask you, are you staying with Windows or exploring alternatives? Because this shift isn't loud, it's gradual, and we're watching it happen in real time. In the next video, I'll break down what happens to the entire tech industry if Windows drops below 60%, because that changes everything. This story isn't ending, it's accelerating. The tiny chip, the forced login, the AI. Alone? Fine. Together? They change the relationship, and when loyalty shifts, market share follows. So here's the real question. What happens if Windows drops below 60%? Because when dominant platforms cross certain lines, decline accelerates. I'll break that down in the next video. And tell me, are you staying or leaving? This shift is already in motion.